So not long ago in a video, I made a point that when you're looking at people that majored in English or journalism in college, you were dealing with people who very likely could have been skipping math class since the 7th or 8th grade. And in fact, they may only have a child's understanding of mathematics. And here we can see this on display via The Independent. MSNBC anchor and pundit ridiculed over glaring mathematical error live on TV. Anchor Brian Williams suggested that the cost of Bloomberg's campaign amounted to $1 million for every person in America. Let's watch.
But you see it as a possibility if he wants to spend $1 billion beating this guy, he could do it.
Absolutely. Somebody tweeted recently that actually with the money he spent, he could have given every American $1 million.
I've got it. Let's put it up on the screen. When I read it tonight on social media, it kind of all became clear. Bloomberg spent $500 million on ads. U.S. population 327 million. Don't tell us if you're ahead of us on the math. He could have given each American $1 million and have had lunch money left over. It's an incredible way of putting it.
It's an incredible way of putting it. It's true. It's disturbing. True. It does suggest, what we're talking about here, which is there's too much money in politics.
Okay. That is Brian Williams of MSNBC and an editor for the New York Times, the paper of record, an authoritative source, which Facebook will blast up there and tell you these are the people you can trust. These are the people you can believe. And they'll go on and they'll butcher this math, but think about what else they're getting wrong. WMDs in Iraq, catastrophic global warming. I mean, these people cover it all. So, let's look at this article here. Michael Bloomberg's huge investment in advertising campaigns throughout his 2020 Democratic run. Brian Williams discussed a tweet making the claim with glaringly obvious mathematical calculation. He suggested because Bloomberg had spent $500 million and there was 327 million people in America, he could have given each member of the population $1 million with money to spare. And so Williams showed a screen grab, and this is kind of the socialist math. What's funny is when he says, when I read it tonight, it all became clear. It's like, I guess socialism would work. Think of the wealth these people think must actually exist out there. And so this post has gone viral with almost 30,000 likes. People asking, like Andrew Kaczynski, how did this end up on TV? Because 500 million divided by 327 million people would allow each person to take home about $1.53 each. And this is kind of the promise of socialism in a nutshell. It's not so much these people were made up, they were put on TV, they look nice, they're dressed nice, and they're actors. They're given scripts and material, and they are just trying to further their acting career, really. So it's not so much that they just butchered the math, but this went through an entire editorial process. This was a proposed story. All these people bought in on this, and nobody raised their head and said, hold on. If I'm giving $1 million out, once I've talked to 10 people, I've given out $10 million. Once I've talked to 100 people, I've given out $100 million. I've given out $500 million, and I've only talked to 500 people. But this is kind of the promise of socialism. It's perfectly encapsulated because the numbers have gotten so big, people's brains shut off. I mean, none of us deal, unless maybe you're an accountant, none of us are dealing with 7-figure numbers in our checkbook or larger. You see $1 million and your eyes kind of roll back in your head, and then they say, and that costs billions of dollars or trillions. And it's just, all you see is incredibly large number divided by incredibly large number. And it's just, nobody has any context for this. But you see, the promise of socialism is the $1 million house for everybody. And what you really get is like a bag of Lay's potato chips. That's the promise versus the reality. And So we have Jay Smooth, who said Brian Williams just shared this on screen like it was accurate and did it with enough confidence he had me pulling out a calculator and thinking I was tripping. And that's the thing. We all have our phones. You could have just whipped out your phone real quick, punched these numbers in, and realized, ooh, way off. Another commented he really should have listened to those who were way ahead of him on the math. The Twitter user who originally posted this tweet, their personal bio now says, I know I'm bad at math. But they're also still an unapologetic leftist. And so we're going to look at a couple things, and then we're going to see how this Twitter user has doubled down, and they still don't get it. No humility. The woman here, her name is Miss Gay. She tweeted, buying a calculator, BRB. It's one of these things when conservatives talk about the cost of certain things, say Medicare for all, and they say, the money just isn't there. They aren't evil. They aren't Grinches. These aren't terrible people. You actually have to have the resources being discussed in order to distribute them, even if that distribution process could be fair and even. When you're dealing with numbers that are just so astronomically huge, that much wealth doesn't exist. What can't be done won't be done. You got to live in the real world. This John Lennon, I dreamt it in a gutter somewhere. It's no way to run public policy. So really what people need is some context when you talk about these big numbers. And there's nothing, you just have to kind of get familiar with them. It's the only way to get good at it. Here's an article, and I'm going to put this map up. Just how crazy big is the U.S. economy? A friend once told me a story involving German visitors who were staying at his house. One morning he said the Germans asked if they could take a day trip to the Grand Canyon. Bear in mind, they were in Michigan. And they responded, I don't think you realize just how big America is. And it's also true about Americans. We don't realize how big we are economically, how powerful the free market has made this country. And it's particularly relevant when it comes to the pleadings on the part of Democrats, who insist we model the U.S. after Norway or Denmark or Japan or Canada or some other country that does things better than us. So Mark Perry put together this map with state names replaced with countries that have comparably sized economies, and it is eye-opening. New York's economy, for example, is equal in size to all of Canada. California's as big as all of France. New Jersey and Saudi Arabia have comparable GDPs. Perry's map doesn't show this, but you'd only have to combine Texas, Florida, and Indiana to have a GDP that's bigger than all of the United Kingdom. Alleged socialist paradise, Norway's entire economy would fit into liberal Minnesota. So they go on to kind of narrate why big top-down forces are bad, but I think it's more important to just note the size of the United States, the sheer economic might of the United States, and it's been created largely by the free market. I mean, our currency is not a free market currency. There's a lot of government spending and intervention. It's far from perfect, but the more freedom we get, the more wealth is created. And there isn't $1 million to give everyone in America. That kind of wealth doesn't exist. A couple of other statistics. It required 32% more workers in France to produce the same economic output last year in California. New York has about half the number of workers of Canada, and yet they have equal economic output. Texas and Brazil have comparable economies, but Brazil has almost 80 million more workers than Texas. The U.S. produces almost 25% of the world's economic output, but with less than 5% of its population. I mean, this is how incredibly powerful the American economy is. So this idea you're just going to have a workers' paradise is crazy. Just having a large number of unproductive workers does not mean greater wealth. There's an old story of a Westerner that went to communist China. This is back in the Cold War era, I believe. And he was watching a squad of people working, this Chinese work group. And the Chinese foreman was bragging to the American. He said, you know, you guys in America, you use bulldozers and backhoes, and it only creates a couple of jobs. He goes, look at the hundreds of people I have employed here. I've taken away their equipment and given them all shovels. Therefore, I have created so many more jobs. And the American looked at him and said, why don't you take away their shovels and give them spoons? The fact that there was a bunch of people digging a hole with a shovel wasn't making China wealthier than America with two guys driving a backhoe. It's this fallacy that socialists just seem to fall for over and over again. Labor and wealth are two entirely different things. So the young lady who originally tweeted this math fail, she hasn't learned anything, and she came out and said, blah, 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 math, blah, blah. People are telling me my numbers are wrong, but the point still stands. He, Michael Bloomberg, could easily afford to give everyone $1 million and literally never notice. To which Terry Schilling responded, oh my gosh, Makita Rivers doubles down. Wrong again. One would need $327 trillion to give each American $1 million. Bloomberg is worth $65 billion, which equals around $200 per American. This is why socialism is gaining traction, because government schools suck at teaching basic math. And so to get an idea of the numbers we're dealing with, you have GDP ranked by country 2020. The total world GDP is about 91 trillion. And so to get the 327 trillion necessary to give everyone in America $1 million, the productivity of the entire world would have to grow by 3.5 times. And then, of course, we'd have to then have some sort of colonialism like the world's never seen, where America takes over every single country in the world. This is the problem with socialism. Like, the money they think is there isn't actually there. You can see nominal GDP by country: United States 20 trillion, China 13 trillion, Japan almost 5, Germany 4, UK 2.8, France 2.7. And you can see they've got a list here. You can see United States, China, Japan, Germany. You can add all of these up, and you're not getting anywhere near the amount of money needed to give everyone in America $1 million. And the only way, and the proven way, is to simply continue to raise the tide. Capitalism is creating wealth at a rate humanity has never seen. Having top-down management of this will not make it more efficient. It will make it less efficient. And life is getting better, but you got to realize how much wealth is out there and what could actually be done with it. Even if socialism worked perfectly, the money just isn't there. And the socialist utopia really is only a dream.